So for my Equity and Inclusion Children's Literature project, I chose the book Love in the Library. And my name is Sloane Shevin. So Love in the Library is a children's picture book, hardcover, written by Maggie Toduka-Hall, illustrated by Yaz Imamura, and it was published on January 11th, 2022, so it's fairly recent, and it is a children's historical fiction book and one of my personal favorites. So Maggie Toduka-Hall wrote the book inspired by her grandparents. So while it is fictional mainly in the dialogue, the story and the characters and the location and the setting are all true. The main characters, Tama and George, who you'll meet soon, were actually Maggie's grandparents, and they actually met at an internment camp called Minidoka in Idaho during the Japanese internment part of World War II. And Tama, like the story says, was actually a camp librarian, and she did meet George, her husband, through this job. And they're the ones pictured there. In the lower image, it's the mother, Tama, with her Maggie's father, Floyd, as a child, as they created a family and met at this internment camp. And while the dialogue is fictional, one of the last lines in the book, "The miracles in all of us," was true and taken from her journal, which is really beautiful. Maggie is a published YA and middle grade author and picture book author. She's written Squad, The Mermaid, The Witch and the Sea, and also An Octopus. So the story centers around Tama, who is a Japanese-American woman living in a Japanese internment camp, Minidoka, during World War II. Tama, attempting to find light in her dreary situation, works at a library in Minidoka where she loves books and she hopes that through this she can inspire others to find a little light in their dreary situation. There she watches the world go by, conflicted with her feelings of hope, resentment, anger, and frustration concerning her incarceration. And right alongside her is George, a man who comes to the library every day, bringing a smile and an unread stack of books with him. George helps remind Tama that while she is alone, and that she is not alone, and that hope can be found in even the worst situations. And he reminds her that it is human to feel upset, happy, sad, and hopeful, and everything at once. And eventually the two fall in love, and they create their own family and their little miracle in the camp. And just some of the lines right there, one that's really beautiful with all the ghosts is her reading, and it says, "In the books were constant company," which was nice. Tama loved books. Caught in their pages, worlds bursting with color and light, love and fairness. Pressed between their covers were words that planted seeds in the garden of Tama's mind. How magical that, even in Minadoka, such a small little library could fit so much inside of its four walls. So just really beautiful language and drawings and all that. And the miracles in us line that from her grandmother's journal is also right there. And that's the last page of the book. So really beautiful ending. And this is just one of my favorites from the book. And George says, "Hey," George said, and for once his voice was small and soft. "There's a word for that, you know." "There is?" Hope bubbled big and bold in Thomas' heart. "Human," George said. And it's just such a beautiful thing that even in the worst scenarios, we're all human, we all care for each other, and you can create that light and that empathy and really share that. So just such a beautiful image. So the historical background of this event is it is set, during the 1940s, during World War II, and it was shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor that President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which dictated that over 100,000 Japanese American citizens would be incarcerated and evacuated to relocation centers, which were really internment camps across the United States. And these poor people, they had no idea where they were going, what they needed to bring, so they didn't really bring much, leaving them in a state of poverty and, incredible unhappiness when they were there because of this. And they were separated from their families, and it was really like prison, even though they had done nothing wrong. So Maggie, the author, wanted to write about her grandparents' stories to demonstrate that hope, love, and happiness can be found even in the most dire circumstances. And she also wanted to bring to light the atrocities committed against Japanese Americans in the past. And this hatred and racism still plagues many minorities, especially Asian Americans, seen with some of the Asian hate that came out of COVID-19 and all that. And just one of the lines there, "It didn't matter who you were, just what you were." And being Japanese American then was treated like a crime. It's just such a beautiful line. It's so heart-wrenching, but, it really paints the situation of what was going on there and the other photos of a real Japanese internment camp. So, this book I selected introduces important historical events to children in easier to understand ways, using less complex grammar and vocabulary to make it more comprehensible to young readers. The topic of Japanese internment camps during World War II is also a very devastating and complex historical event, even for adults. But Maggie wrote the story in such a brilliant way that wove her family history into this event and still leaving it with a very inspiring message. Um, for younger readers, obviously, you have to write about that in a very careful way, and she did it so perfectly that children are able to understand some of the things. So, in the image right there, she said whole families shared single rooms, no one had any privacy. So, obviously, I can't imagine what that would have been like sharing an entire, just one very, very small room, with a family of six. But, she connects it to things that children are able to understand. I do not have privacy, with my siblings, but Yaz Imamura was also able to use the images to kind of really show that, but also to make it a little bit lighter for kids. So, yes, they're all compacted in the same room, but they all kind of have their own little thing they're doing, and they're still able to express their hobbies and skills and once again find their own little happiness and humanity in this horrible situation. So this book it really used the language and the images combined, the congruency, I believe it was called, from Lauren Sipes' book, to really paint this image of what it was like in a Japanese internment camp, but in a way that children can understand. So I thought that was a really great way to do that for children to understand. Um, and then in the end, this book is just so well written, drawn, and executed. It's one of my favorite books, children's books of all time. I honestly cried a little bit the first time I read it because it's just so beautiful seeing this love story come out of such a horrible event. And I think it should be on every list. I win every award. It's so beautiful. I work at an independent bookstore, and I love recommending this to adults because it's not only great for children to read, but for adults, and remind people to be kind, have a little empathy, and look to the light sometimes when things get dark. So, just one of my favorite books, and such a great one for kids who are trying to start to learn about bigger events and issues, but they still, are a little too young to understand the full impact of what these events had on people. And then this is my works cited. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all give it a read. It's really worth it.